Guys around.
What the heck is this?
Are about to
What on
break
earth?
it down like they won the game a million times. But actually, they really didn't ever win the game at all.
Is this intentional?
No. Survivor Know-It-Alls. Yes, we're
What did you
back
like
for
this,
another season. Stephen, it's been a minute since I hit the wordless version of
Play
the
the
Survivor
Marvel
Know-It-Alls theme song.
version instead of the
Yes, okay, we are back. Survivor 47. Can you believe
karaoke.
it?
When you want karaoke
Karaoke version.
Song,
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah. Well, I got something to complain about here.
Yeah,
I
what
want to
is
start
it?
with a complaint in addition to that terrible song screw up.
Sorry about
ruined
that.
the whole Survivor season. When I'm making podcasts, nobody is freaking cheering for me. You make podcasts and they are, talking about you on television. I'm here making podcasts. No one's saying Stephen is on the podcast. It's not fair.
It's not right. It's such a good point. It's not right. And
all the eyes are on you, Rob.
People need to cheer for Stephen. It's such a good point. Please, everybody, let's start cheering for Stephen. Head on over to WeKnowSurvivor.com. Right there in Apple Podcasts. That's where you should put all your 5-star reviews for Stephen Fishbach when you subscribe. Okay?
Here's the question I have.
For once.
First of all, I'm very excited about your new branding and like all the new stuff you're doing. It's very fun. We know scripted, we know Survivor,
know it all.
we know reality.
That's us.
Do you know when you say we, does that include you? Because I'm not so sure you know.
Okay.
The knowing is know-it-all.
Not the knowing is know-it-all.
Stephen knows Survivor.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Stephen Knows Survivor. I'll see if I can get that URL, StephenKnowsSurvivor.com, where you can subscribe for everything we're doing, including my conversation with John Lovett from earlier today, now posted. We'll talk about that. But
I thought he had some great insights into like the game. I really am excited to talk about it.
Great. Well, this is the place to do it. We're back here live. First episode of the Survivor Know-It-All. Stephen, how was your summer?
It was lovely. It was very hot, Washington D.C. a lot of mosquitoes, but otherwise it was lovely. Yeah, very nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Wednesday nights were a barren wasteland, and then Thursday afternoons even more barren of a wasteland.
Okay. Well, we're back and ready to go here on the Survivor Know-It-Alls, and so excited to get back into everything from this 2-hour premiere of Survivor 47. And Stephen, let's jump in. What was your reaction to the whole thing?
I thought it was a very enjoyable 2 hours of television. I mean, it's a great show, Survivor. It really is. They do good stuff. Yeah, they do. And I thought it was a very enjoyable premiere. People are like, "Oh, this is the best premiere since this." I don't know. They're all great. I really enjoy all of them.
Aren't the rankings arbitrary and reductive?
Exactly. I was queuing that up for myself. But no, I really, I thought it was very fun. A lot of characters. I would have liked more Saul. I really like Saul. Just so huge.
Yeah, you've been locked in on Saul from following you on Twitter. You were locked in on Saul in the challenge. What is it about
huge.
Saul?
It was hard
Do you know him?
Do
you know him in real life?
No, I just thought such presence. Like when he's like dragging things, and I love a huge burly dude. That's
true. That is on brand.
Burly dude. I would have liked to see a little more Tiana. I thought she was great too. I enjoyed her in the little we had of her. But overall it was great. Very fun. Some people were saying there was too much scrambling around for idols, too much like looking. I kind of enjoyed it. I agree, like lots of scrambling, but here's the thing about the scrambling for idols. Like the scrambling for idols is where the characterization comes from. Like we know that people are going off in 2s and 3s and they're all saying, "Oh, well, blah, blah." But what is exciting is when like there's a real decision point. It's when Rome runs away at the water well. Like that is a characterizing moment. Or, it's when like Sue is doing the worst job ever of being a lookout. Like, like looking out, like she's really looking out, or like holler. I mean, and like those, the idol hunting, I don't think of just as some like random advantage. It's like, that is the crucible of the relationships, or like, the conversation between TK and Gabe, where they're feeling each other out. There has to be some kind of structure for those relationships to develop.
Yeah, you say the idols are just a backdrop for the camp life.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what is like giving. It's like tennis.
It's a good take.
Yeah. You have to have like a net. You can't have a court. If there was no net and no court, you'd just be like smacking balls around, and that Survivor would be.
You never want to be doing that. Okay. All right. So, Stephen, let's start off with John Lovett here. And, I thought that John Lovett had, I thought, a pretty good episode.
It was one of the best first boot episodes of all time, I think, in terms of just how,
Yeah. Okay. So what was your reaction to John Lovett? Because I thought he was here for the long haul. I drafted him. I thought that, like, okay, he's on all the commercials. I felt pretty good about John Lovett coming into Wednesday night. The show aired, an hour, 50 minutes into it. I still was feeling pretty good about John Lovett. And then unanimous vote.
He was in so many commercials that I started to wonder. Like, it's like in Token Cheens, because let me make this about my experience. They kept on pulling Sandy for confessionals. And we're like, okay, like they want her while she's here. They got to like maximize their Sandy while we got her.
She didn't go first.
Well, no, but I mean, there was a good chance that she might have. So I felt like that, a very enjoyable character. I thought he had some really like very astute. Like when you were in your interview with him, you pointed out how quick-witted and generous his response on the mat when Andy called him out was. And yeah, I mean, it was stuff like that. He was able to take these little moments and really from like a strategic and character perspective, kind of like turn them into something, when they could have just been awkward and awful. So yeah, he was good. He seemed to be gelling. Do you think there's any legacy of Jelinski here, Rob? Because we saw last season this tribe had this decision between, do we get rid of the messy but stronger contestant, or do we get rid of the weaker contestant who might not help us out in challenges? Ultimately they chose the weaker to get rid of Jelinski, and it was terrible for them. And we talked about what a bad choice it was. We said, as a rule, when you're the tribe and the first person, it is out, you should go for strength. That was us. You own it, Rob. It was you. And do you think there's any of that?
Especially because that the second challenge just was such a challenge that should have been like in Jelinski's wheelhouse, where it was a challenge that required like a long wingspan, and so having like a tall person like Jelinski would have really helped them out. So yeah, the Jelinski thing was really. Q was driving that decision, I feel like, more than anybody. I feel like that, and I could be misremembering, but I feel like that Kenzie and Tiffany, I think, were probably more along the lines of, let's keep Jelinski around. And Q was the person that was really pushing for him to go. But I don't know necessarily if this was like that. They're like, okay, well, we have to make sure we don't lose Andy. It seemed like that there were, from the point of Sierra and Sam, they were very much of like, let's keep Andy. And then it
because
felt
he's stronger, though. Like they wanted to keep the tribe
because he's stronger.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like I think, like in last season, like that was a big lesson of like, you want to keep strength, and especially at the first boot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess those are all the reasons to keep Andy. I guess that like we did come away feeling like, okay, well, if you have a chance in that first question, and I didn't really line up the two seasons like you have. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I just look at it from the perspective of, did John do something wrong? Like you've definitely made the case for keeping Andy if you want to avoid going back to a tribal council.
I thought that, I mean, so this is what I thought was really, I've always thought of like alliances, especially in the early days, as kind of like fields of influence, rather than kind of these like locked in number groups, which they used to be. They used to be locked in number groups. And, I think later in the game they become that. But in the early days, they're kind of like hazy fields of, you kind of have relationships with everybody, and then you sort of have to see where the game goes. And that is basically how he, described his experience in the first few days on the beach, right? Was there were these 6 people, like these groups were gelling, this group was gelling. But then when Andy has that blow up on the mat, like it sort of like locks in this whole form where like there's this John and Andy pair, and like we got to do something. Like we don't want to be part of that. Like that's not our, that is suddenly like locked out of the rest of the alliance or of the tribe. And so, is there a world where Andy doesn't have that blow up, and they can, like, there is still that field, and they can pull something where they're, voting out. I think he said they would have voted out Rachel, or I mean, I know he's like, obviously Annika was someone to be voted out, but he also said he had an alliance with Annika. But anyway, like maybe there's a world where Andy doesn't blow up, and there is still that field. But I think, even apart from that, and it's so hard to know, obviously, he's just sort of out of luck, because if they're staying strong, and you know, you have this group with Sam and the 3 women on that tribe, you know, they want to keep the tribe strong. Like, there's very little John can do in that.
Yeah, it's a product of the 3 tribes. He's in a bad spot because that he's probably not looked at as one of the most physical people in the tribe. That I just feel like that he probably needs to pivot quicker to when Andy is throwing him under the bus. Like, it's just very hard to do it, rather than try to like rehabilitate Andy's like, okay, well, look, you know, good to know that, Andy, but you know, I think what he's trying to say is like how dare you, like, you're going home tonight, buddy.
Now, the only other place where I could see him having maybe done something wrong is right out of the gate, right? Where, you know, Andy gives this story about how I had like 4 friends in high school, and it's like, 4 friends, you know, like, and, you know, really plays up his own nerdiness, right? So that ultimately is something that kind of come back. And of course, like that shtick that we all do in the nerd community, you know, sort of, you know, in the, you know, make fun of ourselves.
That's our thing.
Right. But like, you know, that's our culture. But you know, that does lock in a perception, right? Then when you're talking about like who is the weak link on this tribe, like, hey, maybe the guy who talks about what a weak link he is, like maybe that person could be it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a hard time just, you know, piling on that John did something terribly wrong. Like,
I don't think he did anything wrong.
Yeah, I'm more open to say like that maybe did he get a charitable edit, and was there like other issues that we weren't seeing in there? And I think that's, you know, that's possible, but based off of what we saw, it's very hard to nitpick you know, anything that John did. You know, I agreed with what he had to say about like, hey, I'd rather go out swinging than just hope for the best. Yeah. And I was somebody in the All-Stars where like I went to a 6-person tribal council and hoped for the best, and it didn't go my way. And I always say I would have rather have gone down, you know, swinging rather than just hoping that the assurances I got were going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's that question which he raised himself of should I have played my shot in the dark. I mean, he had a really smart answer for it, which was that, you know, can I spoil your whole interview?
Yeah, that's fine.
Just go step by step through the whole interview. You know, he talked about, if, you know, I've got a 1 in 6 shot at the shot in the dark, and it felt like a 1 in 6 shot that like socially, I would be able to pull this off. So I figured he figured he would just like go out voting, basically, which I kind of like, you know, like it's cool, like right to have like gone out but like never written someone's name down is kind of a weird little asterisk. So I do think that I don't think he did anything wrong. I really think that it was just terrible luck. You know, maybe Andy doesn't have the meltdown, and there's you know, more room to play on that in that group. I still think there's a very good chance that even if Andy does not have that meltdown, he's still looked on as, you know, a potential weak link in the tribe. But it's hard to say, obviously. Yeah. But you know, he was great. It's too bad. You know, maybe they'll bring him back.
Even it was, I want to come back to that in a second. But even in the 2-hour episode, you know, it was hard because I feel like that, you know, the Andy situation sucked so much of the oxygen out of the tribe after it happened. And even like leading up to that, it was a lot of like, what does Rachel think about Andy? You know, what's Andy experiencing? And then, of course, after the challenge, and we saw how John was feeling about the tribe. I don't think at any point we got what the other player, other than Andy, what are the other players thinking about John? And so we're sort of like missing that piece of like John felt like he was doing well, but we don't necessarily get like what did Annika think about John? You know, what did Sam and Sierra think about John?
I mean, yes, we never got that like 1-to-1 confessional, although it just kind of seemed like he was, you know, from the story we were told, right? Those 4 were gelling, right? Sam was the glue guy, and like he had these like one-on-one relationships with all the women. And then, you know, Andy and John were a pair, and like they liked John, but he was obviously, you know, he's like kind of kooky older guy, right? Like, you know, more of like an oddity. You knew about Vine in your day, you know, that kind of thing.
You know about Vine?
Oh yeah,
you Vine guy?
Well, I mean, I was working at MTV that when Vine was, we were like desperate to figure out how to like, you know, use the Vine stars. Like we had like, you know, King Batch on our air. Did I say that right? Wow. Batch, King Bach, fish and King Box.
I knew of it. I was never really a Vine guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing I thought that it was funny that John said that was like an interesting observation was like in the world of shots in the dark, there's always a decoy boot. And that was even true before shots in the dark, right? But like now it becomes much more necessary. You have a decoy boot. So like, how do you convince someone to actually vote for the decoy boot when they're saying they're going to vote for the decoy boot. So he was like, Rachel's saying, oh yeah, I'm voting for Andy. Then how do I have a conversation with Rachel where I convince her to vote for Andy when she's already nominally saying she's voting for Andy? I thought that was a very funny.
Yeah, but let's really vote for Andy, okay?
Yeah.
We got to make sure we do it. Yeah. Okay, so you said, could John be a second chance candidate? Would love to get your thoughts on that. Jeff called him in interviews one of the best storytellers, if not.
I mean, that's obviously hyperbole. Like, he was great in his time, but I mean, Jeff didn't even mention Cochran, or Penner, or others of the,
yeah. So you feel like John for season 50?
I would be into it. And I also think this is why I tweeted that I think he would do a lot better because all the season 50 contestants, like having been through the media circus a little bit, will be desperately sucking up to him as someone who's influential. Whereas his own tribe had no idea who he was. So they didn't know enough to suck up to him. They didn't know, that Mike White is casting, the people, from his, obviously Mike White is different, but maybe they'll have him on the podcast, now I feel like if John Lovett goes back with a returning cast, everyone is going to be John Lovett's friend.
But other than the naked ambition of reality TV show contestants, do you feel like that there is something that would be different about John playing a second time than the first time out for him?
I mean, we saw so little of his game. It's so hard to say. He seemed very self-aware. He seemed able to handle himself extremely, intelligently in one-on-one conversations. I thought his attempt at saving his own game was decent. It would be impossible to say he's some master strategist simply because, from the, I don't know, was it even 3 days? The day, 2 days he was out there?
It was 3 days. Yeah.
Yeah. But I tweeted that it would be nice to see him come back. Someone else said it would kind of stink because there's all these people who are so desperate for a second chance. Are we really just going to bring back the most, the famous guy because he's famous? It's not just because he's famous. He's also gives good confessionals, is self-aware, is funny. I think there's a lot more there, but also, as you said to him, again, one more part of your interview with him, it's it brought a lot of attention to the show. I just personally know a lot of people who are watching, who watched this episode, just to see him. And, maybe they watch more than one episode and they become lifelong viewers.
They stick around. Maybe they have to watch and just to spite the people that took out John Lovett.
Yeah. Exactly.
I want to see all these people suffer and lose.
Yeah.
They voted out my favorite podcaster. Okay. So, all right. John Lovett, it's a quick boot for him. I wonder, Stephen, just in the new era, have we seen a John Lovett type? Not necessarily from the standpoint of having this resume outside of Survivor, but in the 6-person tribe version of Survivor, have we seen this person do well?
Because
I feel like that the people that we point to Cochran and David Wright and Mike White, they all played in the old era.
Yeah. Well, is Romeo I
don't think Romeo is necessarily the same as John Lovett.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I need to go back and look. Who is the same? Is Charlie's not,
Charlie's not.
It's such is Ben Katzman a John Lovett type? No.
Mm-hmm.
What's a John Lovett type? Is Kenzie? I don't know. What does that mean?
Wow. I feel like maybe a guy on the tribe who's not necessarily a physical presence, who's probably going to get by on more of certainly a social game and a strategic game. And I feel like Zach Wertenberger.
What about Carson? Carson Garrett is if we're talking about nerds that do well, Carson was Final Four.
Yeah,
right?
Carson's a good point. Yeah.
What about obviously Basile, my beloved Basile? Is he would that be another one in the John Lovett arc?
Okay. Character? So it's possible.
Yeah.
There's a path there.
Yeah, I think you just get in with the right group, and I actually think Carson's a good analogy for or a good comparison for Lovett because he was someone who succeeded by just being bridging social relationships, bringing people together, being self-aware, and great merch. So those are his paths to success. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for John, I think he had too many eggs in the Andy basket, I think, ultimately, where, that was going to be his person. And then when the Andy thing went sideways, he didn't really have a viable other plan.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Andy.
Yeah, what's your take? What's your go-to? What was your takeaway?
No, I feel horrible for Andy because I know how much this was a dream of his and how close he got in previous seasons of getting onto the show. And I don't know the exact circumstances of what the issue is that led to him feeling the way that he did. Like, I feel like that I'm not a doctor and I'm not a psychologist, so I feel like a little out of my depth to like talk about what's going on there. But it seems to me like there's more than just like the normal Survivor paranoia.
Well, I mean, listen, I have been in that situation, and when I went out there for Cambodia, again, how can I bring this about myself? I was, a 35-year-old TV executive, and I'm like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be like confident, team leader Stephen, and that was not what happened. So, you do suddenly find yourself like shunted into this other version of yourself, and especially if you're someone like Andy, who clearly seems like they're really haunted by that version of yourself, that can be a really jarring experience where like you have this expectation of like, not just how you'll play, but how you'll be, how you'll exist, how you interact with other people. And then to find like yourself like regressing in this way that's like totally out of your control is very scary. And, I have so much empathy for him, for that. I mean, I think that, and obviously I feel terrible for him. I also don't think this is, a game-ending moment for him. Everything is so situational, right? Like on Cambodia, I was in a terrible experience with on my first tribe. I was miserable. And then I got a little, I got on a tribe swap. I was with friends. I started to feel more confident, and I feel like the same thing could happen to Andy. I tweeted last night, there's a lot of Survivor people.
You said buy Andy stock while it's low.
Yeah. Well, I truly, like, is Andy going to win this game? It is a long shot. Could Andy do very well? Absolutely. I think that, he is someone who could absolutely come back. Like Holly Hoffman had a total breakdown in the early days. Aubrey allegedly almost quit. I don't know if that's like in the show or not. I mean, I'd heard, so a lot of people have had, fallen apart in the early days and then kind of, just when it's all kind of crowding in on you at once. And then, Hannah had a ongoing anxiety and was in the final three. So, I really think that he has a viable upside. That said, there was actions that he did that were, whether or not they're like manifested from the panic or whatever, that were subpar even within the realm of someone who's suffering from anxiety. Like, waking someone up on the first or second night to console you is a pretty, we saw it last season with Ben and Kenzie. It was a real bonding thing, but that was much later in the game. They weren't allied, and to pull someone like that in an aggressive way without considering how they feel about it, and maybe even in spite of them explicitly saying that they don't want to do it, I thought was pretty, I don't know. I mean, like a little bit socially maladroit. And again, like you're in a tough situation, you're experiencing these huge things, like maybe you're willing to sacrifice, the social niceties to get the consolation you need, but we can still judge you like for that. That's still a bad choice within the game of Survivor. So we can have like empathy for Andy and what he's suffering, and also say you're making some terrible decisions. Yeah. And like even like in the challenge when he was like, Jeff kept on coming over him like, "Are you okay?" And he was like, "Oh, I gave everything I had, Jeff. This is my moment." And it's like seemed like he wanted like this big like speech moment, and Jeff was like, "Oh, okay, you're fine. And then but I gave it all, Jeff." There's a little bit of like main character energy, where he's like, this is I struggled and now I'm the martyr, and that was a little subpar too.
Yeah. So to go back to your earlier point about the players that have come back from a situation like this, I would feel better about Andy's prospects to come back from this had John stayed in the tribe.
Right.
Like if there was some other situation where that John's plan to vote out Annika ends up coming through, and that now like there's this calming presence, like in the case of Holly Hoffman, that they showed at least in the episodes that Jimmy Johnson like gives her like that speech. Like, do you think, is there a person here that could get Andy back, like build him back up, back better?
Well, it does seem like, now, and especially because they all are obviously so concerned about their own, social places, social positions in the game. Like, and Andy has kind of taken on this role. I think you're exactly right. Like if he was part of a group, but now that he's, so much labeled the outcast, it could have like a reinforcing, effect on him where that's his biggest fear. And not only and it's happening, it's not like just, it really is happening. But I think you swap. Suddenly there's like new energy. People are excited. They're like, oh gosh, we felt so bad for you. You feel, you're like, oh, I feel like if Andy can make it to a swap, there is real upside for him, and not just to play differently, but to like be differently, to feel differently about himself.
Yeah. The rest of the tribe, Stephen, do you think that, first off, did they make the right decision to vote out John?
Yeah, I think they did actually. I mean, John had a good point. Allow me to steal all my notes from John. That like he's the threat, right? But Andy's kind of like he's no longer threatening, and he's stronger. Or seems to be physically stronger. Yeah. So you keep the tribe's strength, and Andy's been like, he's not suddenly he's like he's not going to pull something. Like nobody's going to like jump to the Andy ship now. So you have someone who's a little bit kind of on the outs, who's like a safe person to have there, and is also bringing tribe strength. I think that's sort of a right. What do you think?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it seems like that none of them looked at John as like such a close ally. Like that was such a, I think, a damaging thing for John's game to have the person, okay, here's like this strong person in the tribe who's my number one ally. I'm feeling great here in this spot. And then to have that person be sort of like the very squeaky wheel, instead of dealing with Andy, they end up saying, okay, well, let's just, we can go through, like if this ends up being a situation that we have to deal with, we can always then next tribal council take out Andy.
Right.
But we can move forward and try to go back to tomorrow's immunity challenge with Andy and have a chance, to make it through to the merge with the four of us, as opposed to. So I do think it was probably the right decision for them.
Yeah. I have a question for earlier in the episode with Rachel and how she responded to Andy, right? We sort of alluded to it, but
yeah.
Gabby had a really funny tweet. I guess it was something that someone had texted to her. Mm-hmm. So it's like, Andy, will you play with me? And Rachel, in the sand, and that's crossed out, and it just says no. And I think, and again, like obviously there's this, like we have this example of Ben and Kenzie last season.
Yeah.
And so we have so many examples of people expressing their insecurity and looking for consolation, and other people giving it to them. Was it wrong of Rachel, or was she
no,
reasonable?
It wasn't wrong of Rachel, because I think it was actually like prescient of Rachel to identify of like, oh, okay, if I'm seen as the number one ally of like one of our two strongest guys on the tribe, and he's spiraling, they're not going to get rid of him. Right. They're going to get rid of me.
Yeah.
And so I think that she could have been in that John Lovett spot potentially had she gotten closer to Andy. And then he has like it goes where it ultimately went. And then they say, okay, well, like he's actually very strong in the challenges, so let's vote out Rachel.
Yeah. I agree. I think that, I mean, again, like it's like you people like play so defensively in those early days,
And do you know her backstory too? That that she was an alternate. I think she was for Survivor 46. She was out on location. She went to Fiji. She didn't get on the cast.
Wow.
She came all the way home.
Right.
And then to go like the first night, and then here's Andy like in front of the whole tribe, like, hey, like can I talk to you? And like, look. Do you know how like long? And Andy had his own story where he was could have got close to being on an earlier season too, but these people work so hard to get here.
Yeah, they're gonna. It makes sense.
I'm not gonna let you screw this up for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like especially like after the first vote. I think that people sort of open up a little bit, and then that kind of progressively goes on until people like make bigger plays. Although not Gabe, he doesn't need to open up at all. He's open. He's plenty open.
Gabe is open for business. What did you think about Gabe?
I mean, obviously it was nice because it was nuanced, right? At the first, you're like, wow, this guy's really going hard. He's playing well, and then you're like, a little too much with like running around up and down. I mean, it was fun. I see people who are like, there was too much, running around opening boxes, but I thought the treasure hunts within treasure hunts was kind of fun because,
Yeah, I didn't mind it because I think that we were getting story out of it on both the tribes, where I think that these things were so complicated that both of them were making missteps. Stephen, this was a question or a topic of conversation in a lot of the preseason press of that. Are these idols worth the trouble and also the social cost that it takes to acquire them? We saw both Gabe and especially Rome, who we'll get to, have to go to great lengths, put themselves into bad position, all for an idol. Is it worth it?
No. I mean, no. I don't think so. Obviously, part of it is just the fun of it, right? You're on Survivor, you're running around, you're opening boxes. Like, that's its own part of the experience, right? Like, so that's outside of the question of, is it worth it for, in terms of like your game? Because it is fun, to be doing that. I do think Gabe called it quits at the right point, right? I think like going for, in some ways, I think a 3 tribal council idol is actually like better for you than a limitless or final 5 idol, because you have to use it. There's pressure to use it. Whereas the final 5 one, you're like, I'm like waiting for the perfect moment. And
well, I was thinking when Gabe had the chance to go for keep the idol that was good for 1 tribal council versus the one that was good for 3, and sure, on paper versus 3 tribal councils, oh wow, what an advantage. But it's almost like there's no decision there of like, hey, if I had an idol in my pocket, good for 1 tribal council, I don't even know I'm going to tribal council tomorrow. Right. So whenever that tribal council is, I could play the game knowing that I have like absolute immunity at that next tribal council. Yeah. Like, I think that could be huge for your game.
Yeah. And, you also don't misplay it technically because you have to play it, like
it's like you have a free life where basically it's like, it doesn't matter how bad I screw this up. No matter what, I'm not going home next. Like, I think is that crazy that's maybe in a way more powerful than the idol I have to use at one of the next 3 tribal councils, which I might be using at the merge at the point where maybe I don't want to use it in front of everybody.
Yeah, I thought 3 was a good number. I mean, I hear you that 1 in some ways is even, just the limits make it better, like easier to use, harder to screw up. I thought 3, like, and Gabe does seem to be in a good spot on his tribe. He's got his relationship with Sue. There's Caroline seems to be a part of that. All the guys seem to gel. We didn't really, I guess, do we know where Tiana is?
No, Tiana and Kyle, I think, were very quiet in the premiere.
Yeah. I mean, we saw Kyle, TK, and Gabe all kind of bro down for a moment. Then obviously there was a little tension between TK and Gabe, but I agree with you that there is a lot to be said for just the time limited idol. Like, it's a lot of running around, and it does cast suspicion on you. I mean, now TK is worried about Gabe. Now suddenly there's tension there.
Yeah. Where do you think this is going for Gabe? Do you think that Gabe is on this trajectory to be like this major player, or do you feel like that he's getting a little bit of a buffoonish type at it where because I could see it both ways.
Yeah,
I think that you could sort of like look at it from either side, because I felt like that on the one hand, like, okay, he's getting these advantages and he does have this idol, but on the other hand, he's dropping the boxes and making noise, and we're seeing that Caroline and Sue are also on the side developing their own thing that isn't necessarily involving Gabe.
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought it was good. I thought it was really, I feel like it was not pure buffoon, right? For sure. I don't think there. I mean, I think there's like a world where it's like Danny level of gameplay, which is great and super fun. But I kind of got better vibes than that. We see him right out of the gate creating a bond with Sue, and Sue's so excited about that. And it's, it felt like the story was establishing Gabe as a meaningful player. Most of the relationships on that group we saw through Gabe's perspective, right? TK and Gabe, we had Sue and Gabe. We did have the Caroline Sue thing, but other than that, it really felt like, we had Tiana calling TK out for throwing paper. That was funny. That was funny.
Stephen, what do you think is the likelihood at the end of the season that we are putting Gabe on the new era Mount Rushmore?
Is he the one who said that?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think it's out of the question. You know, I don't know. It's a little, he came out so hot that typically the players who, you know, I think the players who have played the best have really developed over it. It's like a fine wine, right? You want to be the fine wine of players, not the like, you know, champagne spray in the face player. Right?
Stephen, who is going to go home from this tribal council or from this tribe if they go to tribal council?
I mean,
do we have a sense yet?
Unfortunately, to your point, we haven't seen relationships for Kyle or Tiana. I mean, they both seem like they're good parts of the tribe, but
you know what?
The only ones we don't.
Steve, this is feeling like to me, this is the tribe that doesn't go to tribal council.
I think so too. I think this is like the main character tribe. I mean, in the sort of actual sense of the show. Yeah. Yeah. It is the blue tribe. In the yellow tribe. Is this deliberate, Rob? How deliberate is this?
I don't know. I mean, the blue tribe, I don't know. They put the buff on and they can't lose. And the yellow tribe puts the buff on, they can't win.
Yeah. Who's the glue guy? Speaking of the yellow tribe, who's the glue guy in the RHAP world where that person is there and now the party, you know, now you know the whole gang.
Mike Bloom. Mike Bloom's a
I was
solid
gonna say Mike
glue
Bloom
guy.
too. Yeah, I was gonna say Mike Bloom. Chappelle was my other one, but like I was gonna Mike Bloom, and it was sort of my first go-to. Yeah, as well.
Yeah, put him on any panel. Instantly better. Everybody gets along. Nobody like I never have gotten one text over the years like hey, anyway, any chance I could not be on a podcast with Mike Bloom?
Are people saying that about other people? Are people saying that about me?
No, definitely not. No. Okay. Who else were you even on a podcast with?
I'm with Mike Bloom.
Yeah, just me. Just me. Yeah. So absolutely. Well, he'd be a great glue guy. But speaking of the RHAP podcasters, Stephen.
Yeah.
We had our very own Asia Welch.
What a start. What a great beginning for Asia. And it was great. It was all wonderful. Yeah, really amazing in the very first challenge. You know, she mentions Rob has a podcast on air. I mean, surely she gets a promotion for that, right?
Yes. VP of senior podcaster now. Asia Welch.
Yeah. And yeah, it just like seemed to be in a great spot on her tribe. You know, recognized by Teeny, which I thought was funny that nobody recognized John Lovett, but you know, she did recognized, and which worked out great for her. Like Teeny was like, okay, we can't create an alliance without Asia.
Well, Stephen, I feel like that we've really turned a corner where I was worried about Asia, that she was somebody who like, oh, if they find out, like, oh, you don't tell them you're a fan, don't tell them. Like there was a time and a place of if people thought you were a Survivor podcaster, you're old enough to remember. Like, what? This guy podcasts about Survivor?
More than remember. I have traumatic dreams.
We hate this guy.
Yeah.
Can you believe it? Vote him out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was great. It was really fun. I mean, I have to say, I was very nervous when she went on the, what are we calling it? The treasure hunt?
Yeah, it was like the new Sweat and Savvy.
Yeah. But it was not, you know, and I thought that was not a great decision, you know, and I thought because, you know, you come home, even if you come home with nothing, everyone's going to be like, what does she really have? And even if you come home with the thing, people are going to think, what did they really do? You know? And so I was worried for her, but I was wrong. I was totally wrong. You know, immediately integrates herself into the group, you know, Rome, who is the guy who's kind of like snickering about her going away. She ends up targeting him. Really kind of almost like the ringleader of that group, where she's the one kind of pointing, you know,
she very quickly came back into like a leadership position, and people like can sense like who's got the leader vibes and who doesn't. And so, you know, Teeny like said, let's just save a spot for her when she comes back, and she does take this role as sort of like leading the witch hunt, going around looking for Rome. So let's stay on Asia for a second. The new Sweat and Savvy, upgrade or downgrade?
Oh, I thought it was fun. I mean, you can only do it once, right? Like, but I thought it was a really fun way of doing it. It was different. It was visual. You know, obviously it was a very fun moment when they both or like, where am I? How do I get back? They're both, just had to forge their own paths. And then there's a little bit of a wrestling match at the end.
A little bit.
Yeah. But do you think, in terms of the volunteering, do you think that's the right move or the wrong move to volunteer to go on this thing?
No, I don't think it was a great spot, but I do think that it certainly is like there's more to gain out of that than Sweat versus Savvy, where I think that's sort of like, and I don't know how long Asia is gone for, but the Sweat versus Savvy, like sort of like the risk reward there is like, hey, Stephen, all right, we've got Sweat. All right, so how about this? Me and you. Like, let's like bust our ass for the next 6-7 hours, completely gas ourselves for the next immunity challenge with the chance that we might be the heroes for our tribe. Yeah. Here, like, you have this situation where, okay, I got a 50-50 shot of coming back as like, and neither of them had to like overexert themselves. Like, I think that Jelinski, you said he was a game changer for like him not being there, but I do wonder if him breaking the hourglass of saying like, look, that what are we doing this for? Like, is a little bit like, yeah, it's a good point of, why should a player kill themselves for, just to get the flint and the pot? You're going to get it eventually. You're probably going to lose immunity because your team ultimately ends up being so gassed from doing that. Yeah. And this is like, something that's a little bit, I'm sure it is was strenuous on TK and Asia, but it's not something that is going to totally like wipe them out. And they got a 50-50 chance to come home the hero.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and it was fun and right, and nobody was that, it didn't end up really affecting either of them. But you do wonder if Teeny hadn't been there, like this could it have been there? I mean, but again, like she did such a great job of immediately integrating her.
Yeah, I think it would have taken longer. Yeah. I think that Teeny sort of like sped up the process. She got like a fast pass back into the tribe because of Teeny, as opposed to it would have taken maybe another day or two to sort of like reintegrate. But okay, Rome was the person who was on the idol hunt here on this tribe. Now, it's interesting that, I think in Survivor 45, I think it was similar, where it's not necessarily, and in Survivor 46 too, that the way one tribe finds an idol is not necessarily how the other tribe finds an idol.
What do you think about the disappearing ink? That's fun.
Yeah, I was worried it wasn't going to disappear.
I thought that's what they were going to come on it, and it was going to say, go to the water well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was worried that they were going to come over and then find Rome sticking out of the well. Like, just see his legs in the air.
What a moment. You know who loved that moment? Josh Wiggler.
Josh Wiggler did. And Matlock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Can Rome work his way back into things, Stephen?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Well, when somebody, and maybe you could speak to this, like has like the stigma of, okay, being the idol hunt person, how do they shake that eventually?
Yeah. I mean, in this era, everybody else gets an idol eventually. And so, or some advantage, they all get an advantage, and they're like, well, it doesn't really, not such a big deal anymore. Or they burn the idol, or they bring people in with the idol, or just over time, it kind of, goes away. I mean, they play the idol, right? And they play it correctly, and they save themselves. And then suddenly, they've got the vibes,
Well, yeah. I mean, when push comes to shove, like if Rome does end up having the idol, okay, now you have to go to tribal council. Now what do you do?
Yeah, you play it. I mean, I guess if you're the target, you play it.
Yeah. If he shows up at tribal council and he's wearing the idol around his neck, okay, now you have a situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, like it's hard because it does. I do think those early, you can get out from under that, right? I think those early alliances used to be somewhat rigid, right? Like, let's make the alliance on day one because that's what's going to last for all 39 days. Now, that's not the case anymore, right? That's just like not how it works. I mean, there are some examples of that, but I think they're fewer and farther between in this new era.
Yeah. I think that in the new era, like I think it's very much like the Sandra era of like just anything to get through these early votes,
right? And then it all switches up, and maybe didn't they like forget that Carla might have an idol or something in 40 whatever that was?
That was the story. They said that they just stopped thinking about it,
right? Yeah. Which is like kind of funny, but I as crazy as that sounds, I do think there's like something there where of course, like you think everybody could have an idol like that. You're always like factoring that into your calculations, and like the the urgency of that guy's off doing that thing, gets replaced with other like more immediate issues.
Yeah. The biggest thing for Rome is I think that he needs Andy to not settle in. Like, I feel like if that ends up being where, okay, so the yellow tribe can go back to tribal council, buy a little bit more time. And even if he has the idol, I think that there are still paths for Rome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What else from the premiere, Stephen?
Worm eating, Rob. Where do you stand on that?
I think that people are just doing it just to do it. I don't really think that there's how many worms do you have to eat to get that nutritional value? I feel like that people are sort of just like it's like their own fraternity hazing of like, hey, you're not a survivor until you eat the worm.
Yeah, I did it in Tocantins. I ate like the giant termite queen or whatever that was.
Yeah,
and it was like because I had seen Jolanda do it in Palau. I was like, that's like such a survivor moment. And what JT said at the time, very smart man, I would eat a whole plate of termites, but I'm not going to eat one termite.
Okay.
It's like if it's like sustenance, then I'll do that. But I'm not going to have
people do it just to do it. I don't think there's really anything to, and then more people will do it because they saw, was it Genevieve did it?
Yeah.
So ends up being a self fulfilling cycle.
But you don't eat the scorpion.
Won't eat the scorpion. You don't have to worry about that. I will not.
Mike in season 30, he ate the scorpion.
He did. Yeah. Okay, Stephen. Earlier this week, you were hopping mad that Survivor got snubbed again at the Emmys.
It is crazy, Rob. It's crazy. First of all, I mean, it's just like unquestionably the best reality show. And for it to not get even not only not get nominated, but to have literally never won. Now, to be fair, the reality TV Emmy did not start until after Survivor was, the initial glow had worn off a little bit. But it's still the best show. I mean, you look at these freaking shows that they're nominating. The Traitors, okay, people love The Traitors, but it's not Survivor.
Sure, but you know what? I guess I'm a little jaded on these award shows. I feel like that, and again, tell me tell me to walk it back if I'm like treading into like way too hot take territory. Yeah. I feel like the people that vote on these shows, nobody's even watching the thing. It's all buzz. Yeah. It's all hype. That people are just like you tell me that many people like have seen. Every single Emmy voter like watch The Bear. They love every second of The Bear. All these other shows that they're like most of these shows have like 200 viewers. You never even heard of them. It's like, oh, I like this person on this other thing, so they should win the Emmy for this. Nobody's watching all these shows.
I hear you. Like, does an award really matter? No. It still feels like a little bit of a snub. Never.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. All right, Stephen. Should we take some questions from the we got questions from the chat. I got questions from the Rob Podcast patron Facebook group. Patrons, I'll be live tomorrow at 3 p.m. to take your questions live. We'll send out the link for the patrons. Okay. Jen Gonzalez has a great question. Wants to know, why did it take Asia only one episode to shout out Rob as a podcast, yet Stephen never mentioned it in 29 days in Cambodia? Yeah, what the hell?
Well, I think the expletives I always included when I said your name were they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's a family show. That forking Rob. They don't like cutlery on Survivor. It's a hands eating show. No. I did talk about actually being a podcaster back then, quite a bit, of course, and they just never included it.
Okay.
They've become much more like comfortable with being. I mean, as someone noted, I think Mike Bloom, the glue guy, Mike Bloom, noted that this was like the first ever appearance of Survivor merch, Survivor contestant merch on Survivor with when in Asia's introduction when they panned to her Jam Jam shirt.
Okay. All right. Let's see if Haley wants to what will baby Andy have to do to come back from this? Will his tribe always see him as a wild card and keep him around for challenges and cut him when they get close to the merge? Or is there a way for him to reintegrate back to the tribe? What do you think, Stephen? Do you have a plan for baby Andy?
It's a good question. I really just think that it's being like finding people he gels with more. I think that, and I also think that like I was saying earlier, like the very fact of a swap or whatever, like creates art. It's like artificial gel, you know, you're like so excited to meet people and you're like, ooh. And I think, you know, Andy is the fact that he's so obviously the outcast of his group will make everyone, other people are going to want him, you know, other groups are going to want him. How did like Holly come back? You know, like they just found their communities, right? Like how did, you know, Aubrey.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up communities. I just think that Holly like settled in, and you know, I in the show they give Jimmy Johnson the credit for it, and Holly Hoffman has become like a motivational speaker. I think she even herself will say like, you know, Jimmy Johnson like gave her a pep talk, and then that was the thing that she sort of just like started to feel more comfortable, and then was in a different headspace. So for Andy, he definitely needs like a beat to catch his breath, and maybe he can sort of find himself a little bit more. I just think that the issue is I don't see somebody on the tribe who's going to be there to like help him through this.
Yeah. I mean, and you're right. Like having that one person give you the motivational pep talk, you know, that can like just someone showing that they believe in you. And, you know, obviously Aubrey had such a great relationship with Joe, and it doesn't look like Andy has that person. It's so hard. I mean, it's so hard to feel so isolated, you know, when you literally know everyone is out to get you, you know, and you don't even have the sort of like false consolation of like, you know, pretend friendship. And my heart goes out to him so much.
Well, I mean, the other thing for Gada to be worried about, and I was making this comparison on the podcast last night, was, you know, you had Gabler, who in season 43, you know, that he is like a little bit of like the outcast, and he's like doing weird stuff, and he's putting palm fronds on people when they're sleeping. And then, but it's sort of like an unaddressed situation through the rest of they don't go back to another tribal council, and they get to the merge. And then he's the first one ready to like throw Ellie under the bus and flip against his old tribe. So that's another thing to worry about. Like, okay, if the Andy situation doesn't come to a head, he's a flip candidate.
Oh, for sure. He's a flip. I mean, like more than a candidate, right? He's almost like a flip certainty, I think, at this point. But again, like, can the flipper win? Like, can Andy win, Rob? Answer me that.
It's only day 3. I'll say yes.
Yes, exactly. It's only day 3. Who knows? You know, like, you know, what a story to say, like, I was the guy who, you know, was having an anxiety attack or a medical issue. What do you think? Medical issue or an anxiety attack? Combination?
I think it was probably a medical situation of overexertion, which then, and again, this is, you know, me as speaking as a podcaster, not a doctor, but I think that the two things just worked off of each other.
Yeah.
Exacerbated the situation.
Yeah. And now look at me now. And so, like, you know, I think we can, you know, say like, hey, you made subpar choices. That's our job here. That's what, you know, why we sign up and why we get up in the morning as the know-it-alls. You know, within that, for sure. But like also have a lot of, you know, empathy for him and hope for his future.
Okay.
And my God, I mean, you know, it's you know, like you said, one episode.
Okay. Yeah. Daniel wants to know, Fishbach, as the JT expert, does Kyle remind you of your old pal?
Not enough yet. You know, I haven't seen enough of Kyle to get the thank you. That's actually what on my resume. JT expert. It hasn't really gotten me a lot of jobs.
Not yet.
Yeah. But at JT Inc., you know, when I finally apply there, that's going to be, you know, I feel like that's going to be real relevant work experience.
Yeah. Okay. Rachel wants to know, should John Lovett have employed the Mike White strategy for the rich and famous, pretending he was just there to have fun?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is definitely a good move. And just be like, oh, you know, I don't need this, you know, but yeah, it's a little bit different when you're Mike White, right? Someone that people recognize from the movies, you know, to be like, you know, obviously he's extremely successful, but like they don't necessarily have that sense of him as being a really successful person.
I felt like, I guess, how many people from his tribe recognize, like maybe they knew his oeuvre, right?
It sounded like someone said, oh, I think I've heard of Pod Save America. You know,
no, I've talking about Mike White.
Oh, Mike White.
Always a dangerous territory for me.
Yeah. I felt like people knew him. No, I mean, you know, like School of Rock, right? Like everybody knows him from School of Rock.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How about a question from Nathan, who says, we saw Andy spiral into self-doubt in a messy way. Very relatable for Nathan, he said. Yeah, but actually, do you think it was actually John that had more self-sabotage? He says, I'm 41, so I'm old now. He says, I'm struggling to fit in. Did he just land on a tribe he couldn't connect with and then have issues connecting because he was overthinking it?
I didn't think so. I didn't think it didn't look like he did have issues connecting. I got the sense that was like more shtick, than anything. Like he seemed to be pretty at ease, for someone who was constantly saying. I mean, I think that was the difference, right? John is someone who is obviously like used to making fun of himself and seemed very at ease in that world. Whereas with Andy, it felt more precarious, right? Like he couldn't, he did the self-mockery was not like, felt like it might actually challenge, like shake his sense of self a little bit. And, that ended up being difficult for him because, and John's older than him, right? You have more time to like be comfortable with your own ridiculousness as you get older.
Okay. Justin has an interesting question. In the past 3 seasons, we've had 2 quits with Hannah and Sean, 1 person who was ready to go in Jess. We've had epic pre-merge flameouts. Is there anything that we can point to that might be the causing so many of these early issues? Is the game getting harder? Has casting even more devoted superfans made it inevitable that the pressure to perform well will take its toll with devastating consequences at least one time a season?
Well, you know what I think, Rob, which is that, more handsome athletes we have, the less we're going to see this. So, I just want beautiful athletes, super cocky, type A Adonises and Adonettes. And I think actually, but I do think like, bringing in more regular people who, are not, delusional and cocky or self-confident even, then again, like the game is very, very, very stressful. And, suddenly it magnifies. And then again, like what you're talking about with these people, these super fans who have been applying for years and years and years and getting so close, and then it's finally here. I mean, I applied and 4 months was on the show and I couldn't believe how much pressure I'd put on myself, like to have been doing it for years. Like it just is like, it's like, that would be so much pressure to have to deal with. And especially if it's not going exactly as you imagined it. And you even think like, it could be going really badly. Like, how are you not melting down in that situation?
Is the show preparing its viewers enough for how hard it ultimately is when you get out there? We know we hear about it, but I think there's a thought of like, well, 26 days. Come on. It's not, this is not like it used to be. And are people like not necessarily in the right headspace for it?
I just think you can never, you can't imagine. You just like don't know, right? I mean, you don't know what it's going to be like until you're really in it. It's just there's nothing that anyone can say, to like communicate what it feels like to sit, even apart from the elements, to sit for a day knowing other people are talking badly about you. And I mean, like, God, I remember like in Cambodia when I saw people go off and they were talking about me. I mean, I knew they were like literally knew they were talking about me because they were okay. I'm going to talk to Tasha about you, and I was like, okay, like, and it's bad strategy to go and intrude, but you just have to like watch it happen, and there's nothing you can do about it, and your whole fate in front of 14 million people is going to be dependent on it. I mean, like that experience alone, apart from the elements, apart from like the bugs and the malnutrition, like is so intense. So I mean, there's just no way you can
But that's not even the physical conditions.
That's what I'm
like
saying.
Yeah, stuff.
Yeah, exactly. There's like that's what I'm saying. It's like that's the least of it, in terms of deprivation. So, and for someone to anticipate it and dream about it and work so hard for it, and then to feel like they're powerless as it's slipping away from them, like that's got to take a toll.
Okay, all right, Stephen. Then Ryan Irwin said, which of the purple players could be a huge threat? Genevieve, Saul, Kyle, Caroline, or Keyshawn?
Well, I love Saul.
You love Saul. Talk it through with me for me. That it's just that he's like, you think that he's like a specimen.
I mean, he's just like a super burly, strong person. He seemed very at ease. And
he's an interesting guy. If you check out his preseason interviews, I believe he's like a deep brain. I'm trying to remember what the right word was. But he like, I don't know. He works with people's brains, but not like David Voce. Like he like works on like deep thinking or something like that.
Wow. He seemed like totally at ease. He was, the little we saw, I just like his vibe. I thought Genevieve was good. I mean, they're all good. They all seem good. I mean, honestly, like Kyle, I love a country boy too. To me seemed the least at ease, slightly, just from the very, very, very little we got of him. I thought Genevieve seemed good. They all seem, how can you have an opinion?
Okay. Stephen,
Carolyn?
You are a master of the edit reading. Do
God, no,
you
don't
feel
do
like after night one that you have a leader in the clubhouse?
No, what about you? I'd say it's not the same anymore, right? Like, could you have picked D from the premiere of D was probably one of the most obvious winners of the whole new era, right? And could you have picked her? You certainly could not have picked Marianne as winning that season.
But Marianne did have a lot of screen time, certainly in the premiere.
But it was so OTT. There was no CP. I mean, I'm sure an Edgic person is going to be like, "You idiot."
Yes.
But
I don't like to know like that. I like to hear what you think, but that's probably like as far as I like to go into the Edgic pool.
Comment that Sam was getting a very Michelle Fitzgerald edit, which I kind of agree with. As someone who was positioned as being in the middle of a lot of different things, we saw a lot from Sam's point of view, maybe disproportionate. The whole thing about him being the glue guy. Did we not really relevant to the story, so if I just don't want to be that. I really get in trouble because people are going to, but he was someone else made the very smart observation that it could be, could be him just in terms of edit, how much they're getting in terms of personal content versus that was always the benchmark back in the day. I don't think that's true anymore. Back in the day, it's if you're getting a story about how you're a teacher or how you design furniture, and that's going to be great for your game, you've won.
Yeah. But now we get that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Stephen, we're back. Was there anything else you had from episode number 1?
No, it's just fun. I feel like it's
memorable premiere.
Yeah. I also think the show's relaxed. I have some friends who are kind of new to Survivor. And so I've been recommending them seasons. And they said they wanted to watch something new. I think so they were like, oh, so we're watching season 39. I was like, I don't even know what that is. But then I recommended, they wanted to get into the new era. So I said 42 was a fun one, and then just skip 41 basically. And they're like, what on earth is going on with this game? Jeff is so antic. There's a zillion things every episode. There's a new thing. Nobody knows what to do with it. And I feel like the game has hit a nice kind of rhythm now where there's the things, but it's a lot more characterization around it.
Decent place right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen, the chat is reminding us you didn't give out your coveted Fishy award.
Ooh,
now, Sam, are we going to make an award for the Fishy award winner so that the recipient? Yeah, we did last season, but every week I had to say, are we doing it again?
Is he responding? I'm not Sam.
I don't know. That's my leadership style, Stephen, of that. I have to say.
Passive
Remember
aggressive.
when we said we were going to do the thing?
Are we doing this, Sam? Yeah. So here's my candidates, and I want your input here. Okay. I think obviously Asia's got to be in the mix. Just hometown hero for sure, but I think she did a great job.
Sure, but we can't just be blatant homerism,
no,
right?
And we're not going to. This is did a great job, making her putting herself in a great position in her group. She is the person who was pointing at her. She ends up making into the target. In the yellow tribe in Gada, we've got. I think Sam has got to be a contender for being the glue person. Maybe Rachel as someone who was able to avoid the stink of an alliance with Andy and then ends up, also being sort of in that dominant vote. And I mean, could it be Gabe? Yes, but there's like you said, it's a mixed edit. I mean, TK had a very good night in terms of, kind of reading people correctly. But I'm going to boil it down to those three: Sam, Rachel, and
can I give?
Asia.
Are you interested to know who I said last night? Or you
and Teeny is a good choice too.
That was the person that I said was I thought was deserving of consideration.
Really, and why? Give me the case for Teeny.
I just feel like that Teeny to me was a player that was in a similar spot to John Lovett. That if they go to an early tribal council, that's where Teeny could have an issue. But if Teeny gets to the merge, watch out. And to me, Teeny looks like they're in a great position at this moment. And to come in after, like, I never expected Teeny to be, at the, like, that high up in the, like, where Teeny is seemingly working well with everybody, not really in consideration to go home. Like, I feel like at this point, if Teeny gets to the merge, when are they going after Teeny after the merge? There's going to be all these big targets that are going to be the big threats. This is the time of the game where Teeny's in the most danger, and Teeny's doing great.
Yeah. And Teeny was the one to kind of like, create the form of that alliance, right? When there was like a conversation with who is it? Who were they talking to when they kind of formed the sort of structure of like this person and that person? Let's give it to Teeny. Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah. All right. I'm a fan of that.
Yes. Okay. All right. So congratulations.
Very convincing, Rob.
To Teeny, winner of the first Fishy of Survivor 47. Okay. All right, Stephen, we've got so much coming up. Of course, WeKnowSurvivor.com. That's where you find all of our Survivor podcasts, and that is where you can leave 5-star reviews about Stephen Fishbach. And Stephen won't be with us next week, but should we still read any 5-star reviews about Stephen Fishbach next week?
Oh, yeah.
Or do you want to wait until you're back for me to read them all?
Oh, no, wait for me. Yeah, definitely wait for me.
Okay.
Yeah, my God. Okay.
All right. Or should we retweet them?
No. I want to hear that. I want to marinate.
Okay. Now, will you, if somebody leaves a 5-star review of you and their grammar is subpar, will you let it slide, or will you correct the grammar?
No. What are we talking about here?
I guess we'll have to see. Make sure your grammar is on point and you leave a 5-star review about Stephen Fishbach when you go to WeKnowSurvivor.com. Okay? Yeah. Very easy. The links for Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it's all right there at WeKnowSurvivor.com. We have a lot coming up still tonight. Big Brother. We're going to be live after the episode. America Lopez is going to join us. She is of the brand new America Tells All podcast, talking about Golden Bachelorette, which hit #1 in the TV and film category.
Wow.
So America will join us to talk about Big Brother tonight. And then her first episode of the Golden Bachelorette recap is going to be up at americatellsall.com. Patrons, we've got for you a patron Q&A coming up on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you want to ask questions for that, the link to do so is at robisawebsite.com/patron, where you can also watch for free. I'm taking on patrons every week in This Week in Survivor History. Find out how our first patron combatant did against me in This Week in Survivor History. You can watch it for free at robisawebsite.com/patron. Club Condo's coming up on Monday as well, plus everything else in the We Know Survivor feed. All right, Stephen, what's coming up for you?
Well, nothing. Oh, I told you the big news for me was that, like, my literary agent I just finished his edits on my novel, and so I'm going out to editors like 2 days ago. He sent it out to editors, so hopefully I'll God willing, I'll have a book deal soon. So I'm really excited about that.
Incredible news.
Yeah.
All right.
I've been working on this novel for so effing long. So it's amazing to be, at this. I mean, there's still more to be done, but hopefully it'll be out in a year or so.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Stephen, congratulations on that. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us back again for the Survivor Know-It-Alls. Stephen is going to be on sabbatical next week, but we've got a great fill-in host lined up for you as a special time, 4:30. Sam, am I allowed to say who's filling in for Stephen next week? Or is that a secret? Okay. Let me know. I never know if what we're allowed to say.
I feel like you're the boss. Aren't you the boss?
I'm the boss, but it's like, sometimes it's like, oh, well, they weren't confirmed yet. Like, they did say.
It's like the president can break confidentiality, right?
Yeah, but I don't want to overpromise. I don't want to say, and then people are like, oh, what did you say? You said that this person was going to be on. Marianne Okich is going to be with me next Thursday for the Survivor Know-It-Alls. So join us at 4:30 for that.
And that's why I won't be here, because Marianne will have, consume me.
She will have eaten you. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be reading your comments here on YouTube later on. So let us know what you thought. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.